Hello and welcome to a new episode
of Hello, I'm Listening with your main host, Danny.
And your main host, or most important host, or VIP host, Woofy.
VIP host.
Yes.
Wow. What does VIP stand for? Very
important person.
No, I think it's very important.
Infantile penis.
Yes. We have an exciting episode today.
Yeah, so we just quickly go into it because it's long.
What?
Let's go into what it is because it's a long episode.
I was just about to, but you
sorry.
started saying let's go into it, and now you're just wasting more time by saying that.
Do it.
We have a very exciting episode today because we have a guest, Poppy, from the podcast Confessions of a Closet Romantic. And Confessions of a Closet Romantic is a cozy, open-hearted, shameless look at the best and most interesting romantic TV shows, movies, and books, reflecting on a particular trope or theme each episode.
Yes.
And we have Poppy on to discuss. We were on her podcast.
Yeah.
And you can listen to that on her page.
Probably
like is that what you
3
call
weeks,
it? I don't
4
know what
weeks.
you call it.
Yeah. But we'll post it on social media
as
so
soon
you
as it's
know.
up. Yeah. Just as a little disclaimer, the conversation starts a bit abruptly and also ends a bit abruptly. There's no real okay, bye.
Yeah.
So we just got really into the conversation and just kind of ended it at some point and continued after recording. So,
right.
But enjoy this episode. She's a delight, and
she's a very delightful and knowledgeable and interesting person. And if you love learning about sexuality and if you love romantic movies, you should definitely check out her podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So here we go.
Okay, let's see. Maybe I'll start with why I started Confessions of a Closet Romantic. And so this podcast came about right at the start of the pandemic. And it was, I had thought, and when I say I had thought about doing a podcast for 10 years previous to starting my podcast, I'm not lying. I had worked in book publishing. I had worked as a professional writer. I was a journalist. And I always had this idea. I had loved a lot of national public radio shows. And I thought, I want to get in radio. And I had tried a couple times and the gatekeeping was really firm and I just couldn't break in. And I thought, I listen to podcasts, and I have for a long time, almost right from the beginning of podcast invention. And I was like, well, why don't I do a podcast? And I hemmed and hawed for literally a decade in fear. And then the pandemic comes along, and I find Outlander when I'm looking for something to watch, something epic that's going to absorb me in this stressful time. And my reaction to that show and how absorbing it was, the romance, the lush adventure and all that. And I thought, I've been searching around for a topic or a way into audio, and I have always loved romance like this. Why don't I talk about that? And then immediately on the heels of that thought was a little shameful voice. Remember how people used to make fun of you for reading bodice rippers? Remember? Mm-hmm. Would see you on the bus, or you might be holding a romance and they would think that was just really hilarious, that you, a woman, like to read about love and connection. Oh, tee-hee, how funny. And I am just about stubborn enough that as soon as that thought came to me, I was like, you know how I'm going to overcome that shame? I'm going to talk worldwide about that topic every 2 weeks on a new podcast. That's how I'm going to handle this. And so I decided, because I'm a former Catholic schoolgirl, the word confessions was a very important part of it. It felt like I was kind of saying in a hushed voice, has anyone else seen this Jane Austen adaptation? Did you see the kiss in that? Did you see how he looked at her? Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. So it started out with I've always loved costume dramas, but I surprised myself very quickly within a few months of all the things I found I wanted to talk about in terms of my own life and romance and connection and relationship. And so I've been at it 2 years, and I just keep following those interests and those curiosities. Like, I recently got on dating apps. I need my head examined. Okay, I finally decided. I think I'm done. I was single by choice. I think I'm done being single. So I'm planning an episode on dating rom-coms. So it was happening in my life, and I found it to be the most amazing experience in that way, that I can make it a part memoir, I can make it part film review, part book review, and it's always on topics and romances that reflect what are going on in my own life.
Mm-hmm. That's lovely. Do you, because you mentioned that you were a former Catholic schoolgirl, do you feel like growing up in that environment that do you feel like you have feelings of shame around sexuality and around that are kind of just drilled into your brain that you still struggle, like when you're recording an episode of your podcast? Is there ever a little voice in your head that's like, you can't talk about that?
Danny, get out of my head. How did you know? Okay, but especially in the beginning. So my show is solo and scripted, and I aim for an invisible script. And I've gotten better and better as time has gone on with that. But in the beginning, when I was writing the scripts, it was a lot about the shows and only glancing on myself. Like, oh, I love that kiss, but I didn't really elaborate much. But then very quickly, I thought, people are going to tune in because they want to know, what is Poppy thinking about this particular romance? Why does she think that sex scene is so great, or that kiss? And I decided that that was the reason I started the show, to talk about why I myself love these things. And my intro used to say, I talk about these things without embarrassment or shame, mostly. Because as I was writing the scripts, I'd be like, I'm this age and I'm like going goo-goo over Keanu Reeves. Can I do that? And then I said to myself, hell yes, you can. I mean, who is telling me that I can or can't do something? And I'm saying this is what this looks like at the age I am. Like, I love it. I am going to say out loud and risk being silly. And that I think that some other listeners may be getting a feeling of empowerment from me being silly and vulnerable like that. And I decided to lean into that, so much so that as I have gone forward on social media, especially Twitter, I've started to talk to other writers. Then it was erotic writers, because my pod is about relationships and connection, and it seemed like a natural extension, right? We all connect. This is part of romance. That's why we show up for these movies. Okay, so then as I went forward, I was like, I'm going to do an episode on kink in romance, because I had read some really super kinky romances, and I'm writing like movies, and then I talked about, why can't you find movies that represent, these are pretty mild kinks, there's like, I don't know, 75% of Americans dream of being spanked in the bedroom, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to talk about that out loud. Of course I am. And romance is set in a BDSM club that I happened to discover just a short while before that, and I loved, and I surprised myself. And so when I'm putting episodes like that together, I trust that if I'm surprised by how much I love something, and if I talk about why, that I can bring listeners along with me, and that maybe they might have been ashamed of even thinking about, oh, I think I might want to be spanked or have a threesome, but I would never tell a friend. But Poppy will talk about that on her podcast, that she read this phenomenal book with a threesome. That maybe now I can actually just try that fantasy on for size and see. So I would say my show went from Jane Austen costume adaptations, which are phenomenal and always to kink and romance, and even beyond. Because I recently did an episode on the Netflix show How to Build a Sex Room. Have you two watched that show?
I have not. You watched it? I didn't watch it.
Okay, it's amazing, right? It's sex positive, age positive, body positive. It's really an amazing show. So yes, I have grown with my show, and that has been one of the best things, that I really stopped using that intro because I don't feel a lot of embarrassment or shame anymore. And that to me is like something I could have never imagined in the beginning when I was so nervous you could hear my voice shaking. I don't
Mm-hmm.
were nervous when you started, but
Oh, yeah.
I was nervous to take a seat at the table and just say what I felt and just talk freely. And now you can't stop me.
Also, I have to say, first of all, your editing on your podcast is outstanding. It's so good, especially when you throw in those little pieces of movies and series. It's so well done, and it's so engaging, and you can feel the I don't know, just your the pure joy you have talking to people, just talking about certain things, and you going into the next question. You already said it. I think like the stigma around sexuality and sex and just being with someone you love and show them has been a very big one in society, and also especially movies. And since you said you're a movie buff, if you look at like American movies from the 60s, 70s compared to now, and then also put in like take some European movies like French or even German movies, for example, how do you feel like the stigma or the portrayal of sexuality changed, and maybe also should change more in terms of overcoming our own stigma? I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like it changed a lot. But maybe your take on it, I would be interested in.
I feel so I was a film major in college, and I watched a lot of international film, which I don't know that a lot of Americans, sometimes with access, it's like, and look at streaming platforms. That's a whole different topic, but streaming platforms now are starting to funnel what's available to us in a much more narrow way and not necessarily artistically in a good way. And also, I think, Wolfgang, it's a really good point to make that, first of all, I don't include international films that often on my show because I use film clips. And if it's in another language, I can't really obviously do that. But there are many international films. If I search for a title like, I don't know, or search for not a title, but a topic. A lot of international films come up and not a lot of American films. And usually it will be a topic that's about open sexuality, acceptance, things that American society considers taboo. So my feeling is that I don't think American films are necessarily going in a good direction in that sense. I think they're getting, like our politics and our culture, it's reflecting a bit of regressiveness. Like you went through, pre-code films in America before 1934, very what we would call racy, but about topics like having affairs, being married, open relationships, just everything that humans experience themselves, you will find in those pre-code films. Then we have the code, and everything gets clamped down, and innuendo has to be used, and people understand what's being said, but it can't be said outright. It can't be said outright. Important to note, right? It can't be said outright, what we're saying is there's something to be shameful about it. With my Catholic upbringing, that's another thing I reject now. It's like, if I want to talk about it and it's important to me, I should be able to talk about this. Okay. So then we go to the 60s and 70s and things start to open up a little bit. But there's sometimes still a lot of sexism, and there's some exploitation of these topics of free love and sex and desire for both genders. There's a lot of stuff going on in those decades. And then as we go forward to now, sometimes I look around, and a favorite topic of mine, because I'm well over 40, is love, sex, and romance over 40. Where are the movies that represent people of all generations finding love and romance and good sex? Where are they? And I will periodically search, and I can find things like Book Club, which was an amazing film. You can find a movie like Something's Gotta Give. But the reason you can remember that is because they are just the occasional film.
Yeah.
Don't know that we're going in a super positive direction on the topic of love and sex. And like I said before, just looking into the topic of consensual non-monogamy, there's still, because it's dramatic, I get it, in a script, a kitchen table polyamory where everybody sits around a kitchen table and talks about how much they love each other and are totally cool and not judgmental or jealous about sleeping with each other. That doesn't always make for the greatest drama, you know, but I get a little bit sick of now looking at this binary monogamy, cheating, these sort of black and white ways. And even in rom-coms, it can sometimes be a bit limited. And I feel like European films are much more courageous, like we were talking about before Midnight. They're much more courageous about just simply like opening the lens and presenting a slice of realistic life. That would be enough for us to live through authentic experiences with these characters. American films don't seem to trust that, like that, want to encourage that. It's all about superheroes, black and white thinking, good guys, bad guys, right? This is our culture. Monogamy, not monogamy. It's a very binary sometimes. So lately, I do find it's a little defeating sometimes.
I mean, movies in general in the US is more about showing off technology and just how much budget you can put in versus just the pure art of showing people and relationships. And if you think, like, I don't know if you've seen movies from Norway, for example, or Sweden and stuff, those movies are often very raw, dramatic, and also like they put subjects on the table like rape, child molestation, self-harm, and like depression and stuff like real stuff. And those movies are not often super easy to watch, obviously, but at the same time, the I don't know, just the human experience and everything they show is so much better than most of the things that come out of the US.
I will say I think to the and this isn't, I wouldn't say to the credit of the US, but one thing that is positive in terms of what seems to be becoming more of a trend is shows for young people that explore sexuality and explore it's okay, you know, it's not just black and white, you know, there's so many different things that you can identify as and enjoy, and that's okay. And I think my favorite example of that is Sex Education.
Right, you're making good points. Yes,
that show is so brilliantly made and so And also, I mean, Heartstopper for me that was my coming out show. I recently came out as bisexual, and that show inspired me to really think about my sexuality because I identified so much with the main character.
I've never seen it. Tell me about this show.
Oh, please watch it. If you're a sap for romance, it's just beautiful.
It's a great show.
It's a story basically of, you know, we love coming of age. We talked about that on your podcast, but it's essentially a coming of age style show about, it's originally a comic or a graphic novel that got adapted into this show. And it's about a young boy who is openly out as, I think he's identifies as homosexual. And he meets this guy in his class, and, you know, he's kind of like a jock and is always like, you know, locker room talk with the guys, but he starts having feelings for this kid that he met, and this other kid, this jock kid, starts questioning his sexuality. And
But it's also a British show, isn't it? They're in London, isn't it?
Are they?
I think so.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, they go to Brighton.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, maybe. But it's so beautiful, the way that they because there's a lot of a friend of mine has been talking a lot about queer joy, and he says that there are so many stories about coming out as bisexual or gay, and there's often so much heartbreak behind them, where it is a nice story, but there's so much heartbreak, and it's just a constant reminder of how difficult it can be. But there are very few adaptations of that where they show the pure joy of it, and Heartstopper shows the pure joy.
Yeah.
It shows the struggle, but more of the pure joy, and it's beautiful.
And I think that is a very valid criticism by African Americans about every time there's a significant African American character in something American made, it's always about the trauma.
Yeah.
Like, it's like trauma porn. And it's very hard to find representation of, I can be fat and really happy.
Mm-hmm.
I can be gay and really happy. It doesn't mean that we don't have challenges.
Yeah.
Have you seen the show Shrill with A.D. Bryant?
No, we have not. No.
But I love A.D. Bryant.
It's based on a wonderful book by Lindy West. And that whole show is about I'm fat, but also. It's not fat, therefore that's the punchline. It's I'm fat and I get a lot of sex that I love. I'm fat and I have a really great job. I'm fat and I'm trying to figure out my way through life as a young woman. So again, it reminds me being fat is often a punchline, and you don't often find shows that just show fat people living their wonderful lives.
Yeah.
It's the same with being gay or African American. Sometimes it's like, just let us live our lives. Let us find our joys without having to make it into trauma porn, because that's not how we feel about about our lives. So I love that recommendation. I have to look that up because I try to highlight as much diversity as I can, and also that represent marginalized groups in positive ways like that. That's what I always live to find,
You answered the next question already partly, but I still want to ask you the question because I think maybe you have something else or add to that. But what is something you've learned about yourself doing the podcast, or that has changed you?
Good question. Okay, I think it was the year to year and a half mark of doing my podcast, and I did a little series called Learning from Romance, and I summarized what I had learned from looking at all of this romantic themed art, whether it's books, TV shows, or movies. And that is when I discovered that I'm demisexual, which, if listeners don't know, it's on the asexual spectrum. It's a sexual orientation. And it simply means, at least for me, you need to know someone and bond with them emotionally before you can sleep with them. So, so I used to joke that I love the friends to lovers trope. I love that trope. I can't get enough of that in books or movies. We're intimate and getting to know each other. And oh my God, we both caught feelings. And that it really happened in my life all throughout because I got to know someone so well and then saw them as a sexual being. And that's what being demisexual is about. There's no spontaneous desire. And I was so shocked that I was like, yo, I got to this years old and I never knew this about myself. How did I not? And I really do credit romantic novel writers, though, too, because a lot of them strive to represent lots of different voices, different types of characters. And I think it must have been in one of those books where they highlighted that orientation, or they talked about this slightly different. So imagine I do a podcast thinking I'm going to talk about these lovely Jane Austen costume dramas that I love so much, and all that choreographing of those dance scenes. They all have them. I love everyone. Okay, so I think that's what I'm going to talk about. But then it evolves and it gently grows and it keeps evolving. And then I find out that I actually identify It's a queer orientation. I never knew it existed. I never knew that was who I was. And I find that out. And there have been a lot of other little life lessons that I have learned from doing the show. So it's just amazing to me that just planning a podcast could bring those kinds of realizations. I mean, and all sorts of lighter, fun things too, like, oh, I think I do like to be kinky in the bedroom, just little things like that. Or, just from reading and watching, these are the things that I've learned. So you'll never say to me, like, culture and art have always been important to me, and especially film, but you'll never tell me that art is unnecessary for human, because I've learned so much from living through the constructs of others in art.
Do you think that there are, because like I said before, I think in a lot of romantic comedies, and when I say before, I don't actually know if it's when we were talking on our podcast or on yours, but I had mentioned in romantic comedies, a lot of the time my issue is the gender roles in those, and how women are portrayed and how men are portrayed, and how there is kind of no in between. It's becoming more, but it's always very A plus B equals C. And do you feel like we can still learn something from romantic comedies, or do you feel like there are lessons that should be taught in romantic comedies that are not being taught?
I think one good thing about the formula, if there is a good thing about it, is that the very predictability of it and the hope that you have, right? Every time. So the formula is happy ever after or happy for now. That's why we show up, right? Especially in a troubled time. I don't want to read a story that is romantic, but it has a murder at the center of it, right? It's a choice that I made. I don't think there's anything wrong with that formula. That said, anytime somebody injects something slightly skewed, something just a little to the left of that formula, let's just say, why can't we have a rom-com with a non-binary person? Why can't we have a rom-com with a trans person? Like, wouldn't that be really amazing? And we were still getting the formula that feels so satisfying and comforting, but we're also, like we were just talking about, we're enlarging our viewpoint as people. And that's why I love art. I don't want to see art that's about people like me. I want to live a life through people making different choices. I would say to you that I think the problem is, and Wolfgang, you've given me the idea that I really need to explore more English language romantic movies. I'm going to do that as a result of talking with you, because I feel like Hollywood is not exactly progressing in that way. I mean, you'll read lately, there was a renaissance of rom-coms in like the late 90s, early 2000s. And then they went away, and you could argue, why did they go away? Just like romantic or romances, my pet theory, and I am totally biased, is because they're not that interested in what makes women happy. How these mythical 14-year-old boys with $20 to spend on a Marvel movie, these are the people they're interested in. And so you didn't find a lot of movies like Book Club with all those beautiful older actresses, But then now they're saying there is a renaissance again, and that there's a movement towards movies like that again. So I just feel like, to answer your question, it's like, I don't know that they feel there's any money in that diversity in those types of intimate stories. I love them. My friends love them. I will stream those. I will rent those. I will go to the movie theater to watch those types of movies. But they don't care about people like me, I guess, because if they did, they would be making more of those movies. And it's very frustrating.
Yeah, that's not where the money is, yeah.
Right. Or let's just say this. I bet there is money. It's where there isn't big money.
Yeah.
To know how much or how well Marry Me with J-Lo did. Remember that movie? it was really very delightful. It was quite formulaic, but the two of them I thought did a nice job. Okay, well, do you remember that was released on Valentine's Day?
Mhm.
I think last year. So it's like, okay, I bet you a lot of couples paid money to stream that at home and or went to the movie theater to watch that movie. I think there is an audience for it. I just
Yeah.
don't think it's blockbuster money. I think
Mhm.
all after those huge tentpole movies, it's almost like book publishing. Oh, we could make $20,000 or $100,000, and a bunch of those add up to some good money. But we want that one big blockbuster, which looks so,
Mhm.
Mhm.
an art. So it's to me very frustrating. Very.
I guess a big reason for that was also the as you said, the predictability and also the likenesses. I mean, most of those movies, especially in the late 2010 and later, most of those movies were just felt like the same. They didn't really different. They weren't that different from each other anymore, and also they went more into that quirky comedy. Like they kind of drifted from romantic comedy to quirky comedy, which not in every sense is bad, but I think the indie companies, the indie production studios took over that. Like, I mean, Bros, the new movie with what is his name?
Billy Eichner.
Billy Eichner. I mean, that's a big Hollywood movie. That's with big Hollywood people behind it. But that shows, and I hope that the movie does well, because that shows that there is still audience for movies like that, and especially movies that maybe show out of the box, out of the ordinary couples, so to say, where it's not a woman and a man, but it's two males in that example, for example. So I think I totally agree that there is an audience, and I hope that bigger movie studios see that, because I would love to see some good, refreshing romantic comedies again.
And back to your point too, Poppy, I would love to also see, when you mentioned that there's not really a lot of movies with, 40 and over people trying to second chance romance type of movies. There's not a lot of it. And I would also love to see more of that.
The Leo Grande movie is a good example for that.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because I can't stop talking about that movie. I did a whole episode on it.
Yeah.
Every time I can't stop bringing it up because it seems to relate to everything in my life. But that was a very beautiful little chamber piece. It was so well done, and it really zeroed in on a very important stage of a woman's life, at least in our cultures, and I don't know without Emma Thompson if that would have gotten made, but it was a very beautiful choice to make. Like, let's take a look at a subset of our culture that's often not only invisible, it's like, oh, are they actually talking? Women over 40? I'm sorry, God, I can't even, it's if our lives end when men decide we're not fuckable anymore, which is just, did you all see the, let's see, it was Tina Fey, it was Amy Poehler, I think it was Amy Schumer did the Our Last Day of Being Fuckable, that little fake YouTube video.
Oh, yeah.
One?
Did you see that
Where
one?
No.
Okay, where they're all at a picnic bench and they're ostensibly getting together because they've decided that they've all gotten to the point in their career where they're no longer fuckable, and they wanted to open like a bottle of wine and just be like, oh, cheers, this is your last day of being fuckable, And it was funny, but the reason it was funny was because it was so damn true, and you knew that all those women were not going to take that sitting down, that they absolutely, I mean, look at Amy Schumer. I've featured her often in the pod, Trainwreck and that sex scene with John Cena. And it was, okay, girl, you had the choice to cast this guy and the balls to do that, to be like, she's not even that old, but I'm just saying it was like, what's the hunkiest sexiest lay that I could imagine. And I'm going to cast him in my movie because I can, because I'm powerful, because I have the choice to make that choice. And there is something like really, I watch a lot of female stand-up specials, and to me, there's just something so empowering about seeing women do these things, talk about these things. And even the book club was a little slick. It was still making a comment about these women going after men of their age. And you know what? Hey, more power to you. If you want to sleep, if you're 16, you want to sleep with a guy's 40, there's no sex police. I mean, go for it, you know? So I feel like I've gotten a lot more militant about who's represented in our media, that we're supposed, like, if you want me to consume this, you better bloody well make sure that people like me are represented and not made fun of and made the punchline.
Yeah. Yeah.
That goes for people who don't look like me. It goes for people who aren't my size. It goes for, we're in that same ecosystem. We need to support. Representation is so important. And, you know, Danny, I had a friend in real life. She was talking about, so my handy person is lesbian and has been for a very long time, but her wife, Lauren, just discovered she fell in love with Julie and then was like, oh, this is what I've learned too. That doesn't make you lesbian, that you love a lesbian and sleep with a lesbian, right? There are these, it's very granular, right? We can feel romantic towards someone, and that doesn't make us necessarily one thing or another. Okay, but Lauren decided, oh, you know what? I think I am lesbian. And then as she was talking out loud, she was like, but I kind of still like sleeping with men. And I'm like, so we can be bisexual. Like, I was thinking, I feel like we all could use as many role models as we possibly can get for all of these beautiful human variations on the continuum, you know? It's like, it's, to me, the fluidity now is just gorgeous.
Yeah.
And they don't feel like constricting labels. They feel empowering to me.
Yeah.
I agree.
And if I can find art to put on my pod that represents, you know, these different types of ways of being, I try so hard to find them and to talk about them. I say a lot to my listeners, you know what I've discovered? It's okay the way you want to have sex, and it's okay to talk about it. And it's okay, like on my episode on how to build a sex room, I'm like, you know what, take a look at this show and then go do a Google search. It's totally safe to just do a search in the privacy of your own home and say, I wonder if I would like that. Or if I want to, no, I mean, there's some people growing up the way I did, they would think the thunderbolt's going to come down and strike them for looking at floggers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I feel like, I hope I'm that person who says, I'm right there with you in the same boat. I'm exploring all these things myself, and there's nothing wrong with it. Representation matters, you know, it really does.
Absolutely.
But it's beautiful. You make a good point. Yeah, I think the society and growing up, especially. I mean, you grew up way before we did, but I still got the not way before. Sorry,
is a little exaggerated.
Sorry, but a couple of years before we did. So and the roles, even when I grew up, the roles were still so like tight, and so you are a boy and that's what you like and that's what you do and that's what you don't do and that's it. And with that comes so much anger, so much frustration, so much problems in later life that we right now are breaking up those constructions and all those things. And thankfully, a lot of people are going with that and are open towards that. There's still a small percentage who are like, no, blah, 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 because of the Bible or because of what God said or whatever they use of an excuse. But I love the idea of just being who you are without feeling judged or
Yeah.
without feeling put into a box. And if you move from one box to the other, just because it makes you feel good, then do it.
Yeah.
Right. It's all about, there's nothing in cement about any of this. And I think what I do love about it, so I'm on 2 kink dating apps. And what I love about them versus, say Tinder or whatever, is that people understand these labels are simply a way to contain ideas, but that communication is foremost when you meet these people on these apps. You right away, there's no BS. It's like you just get right down to, oh, are you into leather? I don't think I understand that world very well. Can you explain to me what you like about that or what you're looking for? This is communication I don't think I've ever had with previous lovers. Okay, it's really granular. You like anal? Oh, interesting. I haven't had that much experience. Okay, in my previous life, like say pre-pod even, I would have been mortified to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely mortified. But now, especially Wolfgang, don't you feel like the European countries, I think, have always been a little more open about the perception of males? What do you think? Yes or no?
I would say yes, but not all of them. Germany and Austria are still very conservative in a lot of ways, and I feel like we are a little behind the US in that sense. At least probably some states, not all of them, obviously, but yeah, it's for example, my uncles and my father, and so they're like 50, 60, around that age. They're still very like conservative and very like, okay, this is the role of a woman, this is the role of a man. So yeah, but it's getting there, and a lot of younger people and a lot of people who are already older are seeing that a life without those limits or those box or those constraints is way better, and you can be way happier.
Yes. Well, and I think there's something, I mean, Danny, I don't know, and it's such a personal decision whether or not to talk about your identity. But I just definitely know that there are some people in my family I would never in a million years ever make myself vulnerable and, I feel like that's such a shame because there are a lot of older people who are just like, live your life, be happy. It's not threatening me that, your sexual identity. So why not, yeah, I find that a little bit disappointing sometimes that I get that it's a lot of, especially the religious conditioning that can be intense. And it can be very pervasive in their life where they, my ex-boyfriend, I mean, one of the reasons we broke up was he was a very devout Catholic. And he said something to me about, hate the sin, not the sinner in terms of homosexuality. And I was like, oh, dude, no.
Wow.
Absolutely no.
Yeah.
That is not okay with me. And I feel like immersing myself in romance and romantic stories has only enlarged that feeling I have of we're all in the human family and there is nothing inherently wrong with the way that we identify.
Yeah.
And that to me, and that doesn't come from just watching Hollywood output. There are a lot of times, a lot of TV shows like, what was the one where Jeffrey Tambor was a trans?
The Prime show. What was it called?
I don't remember.
I don't remember the name, but it was a great show.
Right. Great. Okay. I swear 10 years before that, I don't know that I could have imagined a show like that being made. So I feel like in some little pockets, we're making some good progress, but then like in others, we're not. And maybe it's the golden age of TV that will save us in that sense and get us some really good representation.
Yeah.
Let's hope.
It was very lovely to talk to you. We don't want to keep you longer.
Hey, well, you two are delightful, and I'm so grateful that we could have this time.
So we just finished talking to Poppy for almost 2 hours. And
I honestly could have talked to her for
Yeah.
like 3 more hours at least.
she's a very approachable and talkative and open person. And, the thing about podcasting is the best thing. I mean, we said that multiple times before, and every time we have a guest, we say that afterwards, where this is the best part about podcasting, because you talk to people you would never talk to. Yeah. So, her podcast is called
Confessions of a Closet Romantic.
Right. And she has a website called www.confessionsofaclosetromantic.com. And you can find her on Instagram and on Twitter, but she's mostly active on Twitter with her handle @Poppy_confesses.
Yes.
And
You're saying "and" a lot, and you say
I
it
know.
very abruptly every time. And
no, I just want to say again, it was very cool to talk to her. We have an episode coming out on her podcast with us being guests, and we talked about 2 movies. So you chose Juno, and I chose the Before Midnight movie from the Before trilogy. And that was the base, but we ventured off, and it was
Like
just
we
a
always
very
do.
delightful conversation. And
it was.
yeah. Again, if you like what you hear, then please follow us on our social media, and obviously, that's bullshit.
What?
Subscribe. If you like what you hear, subscribe. And if you want to hear more about us or learn more about us, then follow us on our Instagram or whatever. And
I feel like your brain is just all over the place.
it's melting right now. And again, follow Poppy on Twitter. That's where she is mostly active, with her handle @PoppyConfesses.
And
Yeah.
reach out to her because
Yeah.
she likes talking to people. She told us that she likes to, when people reach out and just to talk about, whatever.
Yeah.
But definitely reach out if you want to hear more about her podcast. If you have an idea that
Yeah.
you would love to talk about, I know that she would like that. So
And
as would we. So please
Yeah.
reach out to us
Yeah.
too.
That's it. That was a long episode, everybody. Until next time.
Watch out for deer.